You know, in the history of economics, we've seen countries collapse for all sorts of reasons: war, natural disasters, financial meltdowns. But the story of Venezuela, it's something else entirely. It's the story of a country absolutely overflowing with resources and with no real external enemy that basically decided to self-destruct.
So, yeah, let's just dive right in because that's the real mystery here. How does a nation that's literally sitting on an ocean of oil, a gold mine, manage to pull off what you can only call a national suicide?
And the crazy thing is, the fatal blow, the moment Venezuela's prosperity was truly doomed, it wasn't the big 2014 oil crash you hear about. It wasn't even the hyperinflation that came later. No, the real poison was administered way back in 2003 with one single unbelievably dramatic decision. So to get our bearings, here's a quick roadmap. 1999, Hugo Chavez takes power. 2003, we get this great purge. Then, lucky for him, oil prices go through the roof, peaking around 2008. And then finally, the big crash in 2014. But it's that 2003 event. That's the one we need to focus on. This really sets the stage for a classic conflict. A massive showdown between the nation's golden goose, its most precious asset, and its powerful new political strongman. Now, to understand just how insane this story is, you first have to understand PDVSA, the state oil company. Before all this, PDVSA wasn't just some clunky government agency. It was an elite institution, a fortress of expertise. People called it a state within a state because it was run like a top-tier American corporation, packed with some of the best engineers and geologists on the planet. And when we say it was the country's lifeline, we're not exaggerating. A staggering 95% of Venezuela's entire export income came from this one company. PDVSA wasn't just drilling for oil, it was basically the nation's printing press for money, funding everything from hospitals to highways. And this is where the collision course was set. You had this fundamental clash of visions. On one side, you've got the professional managers at PDVSA. They're saying, hey, we need to reinvest a chunk of these profits to keep the machinery running, to upgrade our tech. But on the other side, you have President Chávez, who saw those profits as a giant piggy bank to fund his populist social programs, right now. This wasn't a friendly debate. It was a full-blown battle for control that ended in a massive strike in late 2002.
So Chavez is facing this massive strike that's crippling the country. Did he negotiate? Nope. He decided to declare all-out war. And this brings us to the most incredible part of the story, the televised purge.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Chavez goes on his famous live TV show, A Lo Presidente. And in a moment of pure political theater, he holds up a whistle. He starts reading the names of the striking executives, one by one. And after each name, he blows the whistle and screams, "You are fired," live on national television. And this wasn't just about a few top execs to make a point. In one single, sweeping move, Hugo Chavez fired 18,000 people from the state oil company. Just let that number sink in. 18,000. And this wasn't some routine layoff. Those 18,000 people made up 40% of the entire company's workforce. But here's the critical part. They weren't just any employees. They were the company's brain. They were the core technical staff. The experienced managers, the senior engineers, the folks who actually knew how to operate the ridiculously complex oil machinery. The source material gives this perfect analogy, and it's just so good. What Chavez did was basically like firing every single pilot and mechanic at a major airline, and then turning around and handing the keys to the cockpit to loyal party members who could chant slogans but had never even seen a control panel before. So you're thinking, the plane must have crashed immediately, right? But here's the plot twist. It didn't. And the reason why is pure, incredible, world-changing luck. A luck that created a fatal illusion. Just look at this. Right after Chavez completely gutted his country's most important industry, the world entered a massive commodity boom. The price of oil shot through the roof, going from about $25 a barrel in 2003 to a mind-boggling peak of almost $140 in 2008. It was the perfect cover for what was actually happening. And this is what we call the Great Deception. It's a total paradox because all the experts were gone, the actual amount of oil they were pumping out, their production was already starting to fall. But because the price for every single barrel had gone up by 5 times, the total money coming in, the revenue, was skyrocketing. The country was getting richer than it had ever been. At the exact same time, it was forgetting how to make its money. It was a decade-long party built on a lie.
But as we all know, that kind of luck can't last forever. And when the tide of high oil prices finally went out, everyone got to see the absolute devastation that had been left behind. That moment finally came in 2014. The global oil party ended, and the price per barrel just collapsed. All of a sudden, that fire hose of cash that had been hiding all the problems completely dried up, and the illusion just shattered, seemingly overnight. And what Venezuela found was a nightmare. All that complex drilling equipment, without experts to maintain it, it had literally rusted into scrap metal. And those 18,000 fired engineers? Oh, they'd moved on long ago, to Canada, to the US, to Colombia, and they were now using their expertise to help other countries get rich from oil. Venezuela hadn't just lost its people, it had lost the actual knowledge of how to get its own oil out of the ground.
And here's what that looks like. Production absolutely cratered, falling from a peak of around 3 million barrels a day to less than 700,000. The country was still sitting on the largest oil reserves in the entire world, but it had no idea how to get to them anymore. The golden goose was well and truly dead.
So what's the big takeaway from this tragic story? Well, it's a stark, and let's be honest, a pretty bloody lesson in the real-world value of professionalism and competence. This quote from the source article just sums it up perfectly. Venezuela's collapse wasn't because it ran out of resources. It has more oil than anyone. It collapsed because of a total, arrogant contempt for expertise itself. And this points to a universal rule, really. It doesn't matter if you're running a country or a company. The moment you decide that political loyalty is more important than actual skill and competence, you have started a countdown to destruction. The only question left is how long the clock will tick before it hits zero. So for anyone out there who analyzes economies or invests in companies, here is the critical lesson. Don't just look at the current profit numbers. That can just be luck. Look at how an organization treats its top talent. A brain drain, a mass exodus of smart people, is almost always the earliest and most accurate warning sign that a financial collapse is on the horizon. And that leaves us all with one final, really tough question to think about. We've got all these metrics for revenue, for assets, for debt, but when we're trying to figure out if an organization is truly healthy, how do we actually measure the massive, and as we've just seen, the incredibly fragile value of its people?